Hello, happy Sunday. Welcome to another Sunday Mindset with Jamil. Great to be here. Happy to be around all of you guys today. We got a fun and important topic to discuss today. I am coming to you out of Calgary, Alberta, Canada, my Canadian studio set up over here. I've got new lights, so that's fun. That's about it that I could figure out how to work. So there's all this real fun stuff that I'm looking at right now, none of which I know how to use. So as the weeks or days progress here, things will look better from my setup over here. And until that happens, it is what it is. So awesome. Let me know who is here today in the chat. Just let me know where you're coming in from, what part of the country. Oh my God, Paris is joining us from Spain. Way to kick it off. Phenomenal. How you doing, Ben? What's up, John, Sarah, Stacy? Hello, Robin. I know Robin's here in Phoenix, is there in Phoenix, Arizona. Happy you guys are here. And today's topic will be about navigating change. Navigating change. A very, very, very important step in transformation. And it's really, really critical how we navigate the seasons, how we navigate the shifting waters in our life. Because if we do it incorrectly, we could find our way back in the direction that we were coming in. And if we do it with too much vigor, we might end up shocking the system into a really, really uncomfortable space. So there is an art, a science to how we navigate change in a way that is both transformative and palatable. If you are currently experiencing change in your life, then I'd love to see who is resonating with this today and who this message is important for. So if you are currently experiencing some shifts, some change in your life, big changes, small changes, hard changes, then let me know in the chat that is you. And I'll share with you guys a little bit what's going on in my world. You guys know that what I do on these Sunday Mindset lives is I really bring research and a conversation based on something that's happening in my world. And what's really interesting about our lives is that we're mirrors of each other. I'm a mirror of you, you're a mirror of me. And I can pretty much tell a lot of times what we as a collective are experiencing and what we're going through just based off of what's happening in my life. Every one of us is connected to each other, whether you are aware of that or not. We are all connected. And I've been experiencing so much change in my life, so many shifts, that it would be impossible for that not to be thing happening in many other lives as well. And so, yes, looking at the chat right now, a lot of you are experiencing some change. Feel free to be specific on what you're going through. If you're comfortable with me just shouting it out. So Judith said she's going through some changes right now. She's leaving a 27-year career in teaching in 2 weeks, which is a phenomenal transition, a big life shift. Oh my goodness. Can you imagine when your world and how you earn money changes? That's like 8 to 10 hours of your day, 5 to 6 days a week. And it is more of your life than your spouse and children. You're spending more time at work a lot of times than you're spending with the people that you love. And so a big shift in your career is a massive jolt to the system. So Judith I imagine you're going through some physiological changes as a result. And I'm going to get into a little bit of that and hopefully give you some techniques and tools here today that'll help you navigate the waters. Thank you for your vulnerability, Judith. I appreciate it. Gosi is going through a lot of changes right now, so she feels like this conversation is perfect timing. Senora Torres said, big and very difficult. Amen, Senora. I understand that very, very, very deeply. Carlos, yes, Carlos and I, we communicate offline. Carlos, I know you are going through some shifts, and congratulations on those shifts. I know they're difficult. And also congratulations on being able to have some tools at your disposal that help you navigate those. Jose, guilty as charged, going through some changes. John McAllister, what's up, my man? Amazing, amazing dude from the Sub 2 and Owners Club community, also going through some shifts. Isa, experiencing a lot of change. Stacy, we are experiencing a lot. The Salt Factory, damn, man, nice. You've lost weight, down 30 pounds. Congratulations. And I think that's a huge, 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 huge gain in your life. The loss is a gain. So fun. Paris, down 28 pounds as well. Wow, you are all doing so good for yourselves. I love that. And it feels good. Change can feel very good. And that is a fact. Change can feel very good. It can also feel not so good. Robin, going through some life changes, some major life changes, and now looking at some other investment opportunities that will hopefully be life-changing for her as well. Yvette is shifting towards her truth. Amen, sister. All right. Alexander, left Remax after 9 years. Dang, man, that's big. That's a big shift. Big, big, big shift. Miguel said, leaving a 7-year job to go full-time in wholesaling. Awesome. Carlos left his job to take lesser pay to focus on real estate and personal growth. Very good. Congratulations. Ben is in the process of becoming his full true self. Amazing. Very cool. Awesome, guys. All right. So let me kind of dive into some of the experiences that I've been going through right now. But I want to frame this to start off with something that the Buddha had said about life and the source of all suffering. The Buddha said that the source of all suffering lies in attachment. Attachment. And I think it's really, really important for us to focus on this concept of attachment, because I think when we look at our lives and we look at the things in our world that we become attached to, that is where things will change. Because as we can understand, if I become attached to a specific belief system, if I become attached to a specific career identity, if I become attached to specific people, relationships, and these things inevitably change, transform, I'm going to experience some suffering because of that attachment. And so it's really important for us to understand the nature of attachment, why it's there, why we experience it, and how we can overcome the pain associated with this attachment. So currently right now in my world, many of you have joined me over the last couple of years as I've navigated some major, major life shifts. One of those being the dissolution of a 10-year marriage to somebody I consider a dear, dear, dear friend and in my life, and continue to be very close to. But there is a shift, a change in the type of relationship that this woman and I have. And it evolved from a romantic relationship to a true friendship. And that can be extremely difficult to navigate especially if you are attached to that person. And I can tell you that I had a tremendous amount of attachment to the relationship, the comfort of my world, the comfort of my life, the consistency of just knowing where things are, where who the people in my world are, what I can count on coming home to, the stability of the known, the stability of the familiar is an incredibly powerful force. Now, not only did I have to navigate a shift in that relationship, but I was going through some health shifts as well, having rebroken my neck a couple of years ago around the same time that the dissolution of my wedding, or my nuptials had started to happen. I was also experiencing some severe physiological changes, some shifts in my health that I had to navigate. In addition to that, some big shifts and changes in my career, changing tides, both in the real estate market, how we were doing business, how we accomplished our business, the people within our businesses, the lucrativeness of specific models within our business all started to shift. And that also brought some significant changes. Also, some business relationships that I had been in the past no longer followed and were no longer a part of my world. For example, I was very enmeshed in the world of bigger pockets, and that relationship came to an end as well. We decided that we had different value systems and different ideas on how real estate and community operate. And so there was a break there between that relationship. And there were so many people that I had association with through bigger pockets that I would now not be as close to, just out of pure time and access, right? Because as things change, of course, we all have busy lives. And so if you're no longer working with specific people and they're in an organization, you're very likely to not see those people as much. And so that was another shift happening in my world. Quite recently, have experienced an even bigger shift in my life, having met a new lady in my world. And that's been incredibly fun to navigate and explore. But it's also brought with it some new opportunities and challenges, like where do I live? Where do I spend the majority of my time? A lot of you have seen that I've been actively visiting my daughter in Canada much more. And I spend roughly 7 to 10 days a month in Canada every year. I spend 7 to 10 days a month in Phoenix, Arizona every month. And I'm also now spending more time in Los Angeles, where my partner is. And so that is a big shift. And as a result of that, had to change my whole living environment. And all of that was a massive shift. Just last weekend, I moved out of my marital home, the home that my ex and I had built together and lived in for 5 years, a 5,500 square foot little mini mansion that I had a tremendous amount of attachment to. Because I built that home, designed that home. Our energy was in the walls of that home, but it was no longer right for me to be living in that. You know, if you think about a person staying in a city for only 7 to 10 days a month in 5,500 square feet, it's a big waste. And not only was it a big waste for me to just continue having my things there, but that asset is owned both by myself and my ex, and leaving it unoccupied or for my dog sitters for 3 weeks out of every month was not a great use of the resource that both her and I own. And so the right thing for me to do in that specific instance is to move out of that place and into a new property. And so all of these things are happening, and I have and been going through a tremendous amount of transition as a result. Now, I can tell you that that transition is really uncomfortable. It doesn't feel good. You start to question if you're making the right decision. You start to question if this change is really what you're supposed to be moving towards, because it feels so uncomfortable. It feels almost wrong, right? And that is a pretty interesting feeling to understand. And I want to help us realize what that change in feeling is actually attributed to. So I did a little bit of research, and what I was able to conclude is that when we are in these states of change, our physiology, our bodies are also going through tremendous changes as well. The thoughts that we think produce specific emotions in our produce specific chemistry in our body, and the chemistry in our body is what gives us the emotion, the emotional feeling that we have. But those thoughts that we generate are actually a product of our underlying belief system. And so I want you guys to think about this from this perspective. What we believe to be true in our world generates the thoughts that we think. Those thoughts that we think create chemistry in our body, which then translates into emotions. Those emotions, once processed by this system, create action. And that action creates our life. And when we are going through change, what ends up happening is the things that we believe are no longer true. They're no longer true. And so our belief system shifts, it shakes, it trembles, and it changes. And when that belief system changes, well, our thoughts then change. And when our thoughts change, we create new chemistry. And when we create new chemistry, our body has a reaction to that. Now, I want you to kind of think of the system, our physiology, as you would any other system that has feedback loops. Our body is one of the most sophisticated feedback loops that exists. And what our body is constantly trying to do is push us back into homeostasis, right? For anyone who's ever studied any science, you'll understand that we're constantly in change, we're constantly in flux. Our environment is changing, our lives are changing, our thoughts and moods, the things that we eat constantly change. We are in different situations, we have different stressors, and that again creates different chemistry in the body. Now, the interesting thing about people is because we are creatures of habit, many of us form these very crystallized habits and routines in our life, which give us a lot of power. That consistency that we have can be very, very helpful in getting us to a specific goal in our world. But that consistency can also become a double-edged sword, because what ends up happening with that consistent chemistry that our body is producing, our physiology becomes addicted to that chemistry. Let's take, for example, a toxic love relationship. Many of you watching this right now can probably think of a time in their lives or in your lives where you were in, or you might even be right now in, a very tumultuous love relationship. I have been in one in my world in the past. Very, 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 very toxic. It was the cycle of explosive fighting and then very, very, very passionate coming together, followed by more explosive fighting and passionate coming together, and so on and so forth. And what I really understood was happening is every time that we would get into the chaos, every time that we would get into the polarity of the fight, it was happening almost like clockwork. And it was really difficult for me to pinpoint why. But what I came to the conclusion of is that the chemistry that was associated with that patterning, the chemistry that was associated with the chaos of the fight, was something that both myself and my ex partner had become addicted to. And the chemistry that would then be delivered in our bodies of the passionate coming together was another chemistry that our body had become addicted to. And so we found ourselves in these swings of fighting, making up, fighting, making up, fighting, making up, because that's what our body became habituated to. Much like a drug addict, if any of you have ever had any run-ins, family relations, or experience with someone suffering through addiction, you will find that an addict will typically do any and everything they can to get their hands on the chemistry that brings them back into homeostasis. They will lie, they will steal, they will cheat, they will hurt family, they will hurt themselves. It's almost to a point of psychosis at the level an addict will go to get their hands on the chemistry that their body needs to be in homeostasis. That's how strong the drive for homeostasis is in the human system. And so if you think about a drug addict going through a robbery to get their hands on their fix so that they can use, why wouldn't someone do something as small as picking a fight with the partner if that was going to deliver to them the drug that their body is addicted to? Does that make sense? I want you to let me know if you're tracking this, because this is the place where we become very treacherous to ourselves. Now, if you realize that you have become addicted to that chemistry, one of the most crazy things that we will do is we will invent, create, and manipulate our own thoughts in order to get to the chemistry that our body is addicted to. This is why you see people who are exiting long romantic relationships will tend to speak of the partner that they ended up breaking things off with, or that things got broken off with very, very, very loving, rose-colored glasses when they're speaking after the fact of what transpired in their relationship. I can tell you I did that very much, although the truth is we had grown apart over years. The reality is there were issues in the relationship that were insurmountable. And those issues were what helped cause the break. Yet once the break happened, my mind almost immediately pushed those issues away, focusing only on these instances where everything was magical, everything was perfect, everything was right. And I stayed focused on the lie that there was nothing wrong, that there was nothing bad, that there was no true reason for the split to actually happen. I focused on the rose-colored lie, on that lens that wasn't true, because my body wanted the chemistry. And so I was literally lying to myself, manipulating myself, hurting myself, so that I would go back into a situation that was no longer aligned for me. Now, how crazy is it that we will do that to ourselves? That we will manipulate ourselves, that we will lie to ourselves, that we will ultimately sabotage our growth, sabotage our evolution, and sabotage our true fulfillment and happiness for the comfort of chemistry, for the comfort of our fix in the moment. And so if you do not see yourself in parallel to what a drug addict goes through, then you are not truly understanding what we as human beings go through in the face of change. And that is why the Buddha said that the source of all suffering is attachment. We become attached to the home. We become attached to the career. We become attached to the idea of a relationship. We become attached to the idea of an identity that we have of ourselves. And when that no longer is there, the attachment changes and the chemistry changes. And that is where we suffer. That is where we find our pain. And so, as you are going through changes in your life, as you are navigating seasons evolving and seasons changing in your world, people coming and people going, what you have to understand is that what was once your life had a chemistry associated with it. And it doesn't mean that the chemistry associated with it was all positive for you. Look, a person addicted to fentanyl is still addicted to fentanyl, even though fentanyl will kill them. Think about that. A person addicted to fentanyl will still chase that drug, knowing that that drug will ultimately kill them. So then tell me, why is it that we don't understand that about a failed relationship, a failed career, or a shifting tide in our living circumstances and situation? Why are we so unwilling to understand that our life changing is tantamount to having to detox from a specific type of life chemistry? And in that, we must give ourselves some grace in order to navigate that change, to be able to process and to overcome what we are facing. And so, if right now you're in a circumstance or a life situation where there's a massive amount of change going on, I imagine it's extremely uncomfortable, painful. You probably feel alone. And there's a high likelihood that the people in your life, much like the people in the life of an addict, aren't offering a tremendous amount of support. Because many people who have a drug addict in their life will look at the drug addict and just say, why don't you just stop? Why don't you just stop? And when you are dealing with addiction, when someone says to you, why don't you just stop? You know that they have no idea what that feels like at all. And so, if you're navigating a big shift in your life, when someone says, why can't you just get over him? Why can't you just get over her? Why can't you just go apply for another job? Why can't you just do this one little thing? They are literally saying to an addict, why don't you just stop? Not that easy to do. Not that easy to do. We do, however, have some tools available to us in our lives that we can bring into our world to help us navigate some of these changes. And I will share with you some of the techniques that I personally use to overcome the uncomfort of the shift in my body's chemistry. Here's the facts. It's not going to be comfortable. It's not going to be easy. You will ultimately have to face the discomfort of change. And the only way to get on the other side of it is to go through it. When I first had the marriage breaking apart, for roughly 2 months, I drowned myself in alcohol. It was terrible. It was terrible. I drank every single day. And although temporarily, after maybe the first few sips, I felt some relief, the reality is it was false. You see, there's a reason they call alcohol spirits. The reason being is because it is a false spirit, an exogenous spirit, a mimic of spirit. And like anything that is not real, illusory, or true, it will have with it a residue that will show us and tell us that it isn't real, and hence the hangover. Why is it that you can have a great night of numbing yourself and wake up the next morning like you have never been in that much pain? Why? And yes, some of you will say dehydration, Jamil, that's purely it. But the reality is it's because of the drop. It's because we falsely elevated ourselves and we numbed our pain, only to find ourselves even more raw, more vulnerable when the drink wears off. And that's where the cycle of addiction finds itself in a spiral. Because in order to overcome the feeling of despair, the feeling of pain, we take another drink. We have another round. And it's that false light. It's that illusory nature of an exogenous solution that ultimately is our downfall in those circumstances and situations. Now, for me, when I found myself drinking every day for the 2 months, I didn't understand. Even though I knew there were better ways, even though I inherently understood that I could deal with this in a more productive manner, the ease at which the masks, the fake solutions are available make it even that much more difficult to overcome. Now, as easy as it is for me to get to a liquor store or a corner store and buy alcohol, imagine if your body was the liquor store. Imagine if your body was the liquor store. At least for me, I had to find my way in out of my hole that I was in my life. I had to put on clothes. I had to either find my way to a liquor store through by an Uber or by getting in a car and driving there and buying the solution and then coming home and then ingesting what I thought was a solution. There's a whole process to that. It required me to do things. It required some effort. On the other side of that, when our body is craving chaos, the negativity, the chemistry of that toxic relationship, of that toxic circumstance or person or situation, it only needs a thought to create the chemistry that we require to numb the pain. And hence, friends, why we find ourselves in thought loops. This is why depression exists. Because when we're depressed, we are focusing on thoughts rooted in the past. And when we're anxious, we are finding ourselves rooted in a loop of thoughts that are hallucinating an unmanifest future. That is the human condition. That is what we have to face as people. And in order for us to change the drugstore that exists in our body, the most sophisticated pharmacy ever created, we have to make adjustments to the pharmacist. How do you do that? How do you do that? First, it requires a change in belief. It requires a change in belief. And the only way that you can change the belief is by realizing that there needs to be a change in identity. When the relationship of my marriage fell apart, I was no longer the husband. I was no longer a husband. That was a big, big identity change for me. When aspects of my career started to shift, I had to face that I was no longer in specific business relationships. That's a real thing. And so that identity had to change. Now, often what we do is we replace the shifts in identity with lies, with ideas that reinforce what we lost, with concepts that pull us back into what was and bar us from making the evolutionary change that's required for us to grow. That's the mind fuck. And that's where, friends, we become our biggest obstacle. Now, the facts for me were that I needed to not only make the change in my identity, but I had to replace that change with a new version, with a version of myself that I wanted to be, that I was proud of becoming. And so that required architecture and associated construction, because that Jamil wasn't real yet. And I was in a state of limbo, going from one version of me to the next version of me. That place is uncomfortable, painful, scary, confusing, sad, painful. So if right now, in your season of change, if what you're experiencing are any of those emotions, you're exactly where you're supposed to be, feeling exactly what you're supposed to feel. Now, you can opt to numb that, to turn away from it, to run towards what was so that you can get your fix on the old chemistry. Or you can understand that you are shifting, evolving, transforming, growing, and changing. And just like a teenager going through physical growing pains as they become taller, there will be pain associated with your growth. And when you can come to terms with the fact that that's pain, you will be able to identify love in that pain. You will. At the end of the day, pain is an emotion or a sensation that we feel that alerts us to where we need to put attention, to where we need to put awareness. And that is where we have our power, our attention, our focus. The double slit experiment proved that reality is a product of attention. When the observer effect confirmed that everything that exists in the manifest world exists once observed, it gave us an incredible variety of possibility. And for anyone right now suffering through limited beliefs about themselves, about others, about the world, about what you can or can't be, then that is where we have an opportunity to grow, where we have an opportunity for evolution, and where we can finally take control of our life. And ultimately, what is a result of that? So for me, some of the techniques that became incredibly helpful was my friends, to be able to lean on people like Pace, who were truly there to support me. I even found a lot of comfort in maintaining a new relationship with my ex to try to see what this could become or what this would look like as a friendship instead of a romantic relationship. And in that new relationship, found a tremendous amount of relief. But nothing outside of myself helped as much as sitting with it, feeling it, accepting it. If you are navigating a change in your life right now, the first step is to accept. Accept that things are changing. Accept that you are evolving. Accept that what was no longer is. Now, if you want a big change in your life, if you want a big change in your relationships, if you want a big change in your money, in your career, you won't experience any of that unless your energy changes. I learned about an experiment from Dr. Joe Dispenza that showed us that your energy field, actually informs reality instead of your person or your body informing your energy. A lot of us had this mistaken belief that we were the cause of the emanation of the electromagnetic field of our body, when in reality, the electromagnetic field is what's informing the physical manifestation of our lives. An experiment was done where they looked at eggs, these embryonic eggs, and they were reading the energy field around these eggs. Now, interestingly enough, they found by looking at the energy field of these eggs that there was a specific distortion that they could find happened in a pattern repeatedly to some, but not all, of these eggs. Now, once they looked at the reality of what that egg became, they came to find out that everything that had that distortion in that field ended up with a specific type of cancer. But the distortion existed before the cancer. So that begs the question, how do we change our energy? How do we change our energy? Because if we know that if we change our energy, we change our life. If we change our field, we change our reality. If we change our what we emit, we will change what we attract. Then that puts the power back in ourselves. That puts the power back in our hands, and it puts the power back in our heart. Acceptance being step number one. Step number two is returning back to silence, to be still. The stillness, once we remove the noise of our friends' opinions, once we remove the noise of the chatter in our minds, once we remove the noise of social media and what we think society expects and wants of us, once we remove the noise of expectation, of dogma, then we get to really understand what is truly calling us and who we really and truly are. And so once we've found acceptance, our next step is to find stillness. And in that stillness, we will be able to identify and find what is truly our want, our heart's desire, what is true for you, what is true for you. And when you can finally define what is true for you, what you really want, what is your truth, your real desire, then it matters not what your friends say, your family, the people around you, social media, society, expectations, religious dogma, none of it. None of it matters, because we inherently then know what is true and real for us. Now, if you're having a hard time hearing that voice, hearing that inner guidance system that every single one of us is born with, there are some techniques that I'll share with you that can be super helpful. The first of which is returning to nature, getting outside, taking a walk, and asking, setting an intention, having dialogue with our source, to be shown, to be given, to be spoken into what it is we need to be our best and true self. Getting outside and walking in nature is one of the most transformative and healing things that we can do for ourselves and for our growth and for our healing. The second thing that has been very helpful for me is breath work. Understanding that we have the ability to change our physiology, that we have the ability to change our cadence of our breath, that we can change the chemistry of our blood through our breath, gives us a tremendous amount of power as a species. I don't know another species out there that can consciously manipulate their biochemistry, but we can. We can do that. And in that breath work, we can now interject new chemistry, new molecules, new neurotransmitters that will make the change more palatable, more easy to navigate and accept. And when we add meditation to breath work, we give ourselves a tremendous amount of power. For me, getting out into nature, being still, accepting my life as it is, changing the chemistry that's in my body through breathing, and then inviting through intention a dialogue with my source has been the absolute game changer in my world. Now, over the last 12 months, as I've come out the other side of a very difficult transitionary period in my life, I can tell you standing on the edge of a brand new one, it's still scary. It's still a little uncomfortable. It's still raw. But what it also is beautiful. What it also is real life. And I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't trade a life that I'm living right now for one without sorrow, for one without pain, for one without growth and evolution. Because, friends, I don't get to this place in my world, I don't get to this place in my life without it. And so as you're navigating the changing your life right now, the seasons shifting, remember that you don't get to the next chapter if you stay in the last one. You have to turn the page. And the reality is your next chapter is being written by the pen in your hand, which is now. I want to express my gratitude to all of you for spending this time with me and being as committed to your growth and your evolution as we are to be here on a Sunday to be open, honest, real with ourselves, to be able to walk through this purifying process of change, to be the phoenix that rises out of the fire and the flame. We become the distilled version of ourselves, the pure essence of who we're supposed to be. I bless you all. I wish you all a tremendous amount of love, happiness, and acceptance as your lives will and are undoubtedly changing. I'll see you guys all in a couple of weeks. God bless you. I love you. And be good to yourself. Take care.